Hey everyone, how's it going? In this video, we finally finished the Red Bull Soapbox car. We test all the mechanisms and make sure everything's working, and then we go to the event. Now at the event, we dress like idiots, we do some skits, and we talk to a bunch of people, and most importantly, we destroy the car like we're supposed to. Now, anytime I'm 3D printing, I also have to print toys for my son, which you see here, and we had a generally good time. If you don't remember from my last video, or if you haven't seen it, I was building a frame for the Red Bull Soapbox race, and we got to test it in the last video as well. Everything worked pretty good, but I had to finish the body. Now, if you don't know what a Red Bull Soapbox race is, it's this extravagant event that Red Bull puts on where people build downhill soapbox racers, but instead of just speed, you're looking for creativity and showmanship. So you see some really cool, outlandish ideas like you see right here. It was a pretty busy event. Overall, it was awesome. Now, the track itself has some jumps, it has different obstacles, and it's lined with hay bales so you don't plow into a spectator. Now, the theme for our car was the Lamborghini Countach from Wolf of Wall Street, which meant that we were reenacting the scene from the country club where he crawls into the car and just totally wrecks it the whole way home and destroys everything. That meant that I had to design in specific parts to fail so they didn't slow me down too much while they crashed. Here's the car loaded up in the trailer, and bonus points for anyone that knows what Multi-21 on that license plate stands for. Now, I'm pulling up to the venue. You drop off the day before the event so that you can get everything set up because there's quite a long process with 47 cars. The Red Bull girls came out, helped me unload, and I'm pushing it over to my parking space so that everything is prepped and ready to go. Now, this is the day of the race. We have our giant Stratton Oakmont banner. We're parked and we're ready to go. And we handed out these participation ribbons just to mess with the other teams a little bit and get inside their head. There was a really funny team. They were the Monty Python team walking around clapping coconuts. I thought that was hilarious. And again, of course, I'm going to let my son ride in the car. We had loads of kids taking pictures in this thing. It was great. It was perfect for the kids. This is the event right before it started. And the winner of this got to skydive with the Red Bull skydive team. But you see this ambulance here, unfortunately one of them had kind of a rough landing and hurt his leg, so everyone was kind of leery to actually win. I think he was okay in the end. It was just because of how steep slope that side was, but it was just kind of an odd coincidence that it happened there. Now here's our skit. You can see me crawling in the car just like Leo, and that's why it was so critical for these Lamborghini doors to actually work, because they were integral to our skit. Guys are getting ready to push me off. They have to pause for a second, but then we're off. Now, I immediately start throwing money out of my pocket just for the theatrics, but I almost steered right into the hay bales. The first jump was pretty tame, and you can kind of see it. My door was already starting to fall off, and this last jump finishes it off. That was a designed weak point that I'll cover later in this video and show you the simulation I ran to make sure that that would actually happen. The second jump was a lot more fun, and you see me smile here. And I opened the other door because I had actually taped that one closed just to make sure that at least one door was good in the event that one of them broke early. And at the very end of this, I just start plowing into the hay bales intentionally because that's how Leo just totally destroys the car at the end of the filming. I was not happy with our score though. It was pretty low. I will say there were some better showmans, and even my bribe at the very end of the interview didn't work at all. We didn't come in the top 10, but we finished and we had a lot of fun. And the car was totally demolished. It broke where it was supposed to. Most of the panels fell off, and we had a great time doing it. And now I'm going to get quiet for the first person view of the race.
Inspired by the Wolf of Wall Street, the Wolf of Main Street. It looks like real hunters are floating around up here on the top. I was about to jump for one. I got a great case full of cat. Hey, live. The money while steering the vehicle. Wolf of Main Street ran right through Frisco at the fitting. Car wash without a problem, getting clean, lean, and mean. That Lambo's got a little chatter on the front end, doesn't it? Hold on, stop losing ball.
Not a scratch on her. Now this was all designed in Fusion 360, and like I said, the hinge was so important that a lot of the car itself was designed around this Lamborghini hinge. Now here is the hinge bracket simulation that I ran. Under 1G, which is just the weight of the door, you can see most of the part is less than a safety factor of 3 and some of it is around 1, which means that the weight of the door alone is almost failing the part, so any shock load would cause this thing to break, and that's exactly what I wanted to happen right after a jump, but I didn't want it to fall off on its own before it was ready to. It was then time to 3D print a test sample to make sure everything moves like I wanted, and you can see here that it works perfectly. And I also tested to make sure it does fail right on that shear plane, which you can see it did. Here's the point in the race where it finally catastrophically gives up and is barely being held on by a rubber band. Building this door was pretty straightforward. It was a bunch of 3D printed parts that I just kind of glued together with different types of epoxy. I tested it before it was time to put all the panels on, and everything was good to go. Now, anytime I break out my 3D printer, my son expects me to become a toy factory, so it takes about twice as long because every other print is a toy dinosaur.
A dinosaur.
You ready to get it out?
Yeah.
And now I'm installing the most critical pads that there are right on the steering column. Body panels were all made out of corrugated plastic, and I just projected the outline of the car on a giant sheet of corrugated plastic and traced it. You can see that I made drawings in Fusion 360 and scaled them so I knew how to measure and dimension the actual drawing on the plastic itself so the dimensions were right. I started out cutting this with scissors, and it looks quick in this hyperlapse, but it was an absolute disaster. And it was taking forever. The lines were all jagged. So finally I looked up this tool called the Zip Snip. It's like these rotary scissors, and that thing is a beast. It cuts right through the corrugated plastic so quickly that I felt like an idiot for not doing this sooner. After the main panels were trimmed, it was time to go ahead and put everything together and test the doors again to make sure that with the panels on, there's enough clearance to make everything work. The windows themselves were just a vinyl wrap, but that was such a pain to learn how to do initially because I was getting so many bubbles. I ended up having to rip these things off and redo the whole process, but I finally got it down and decided never to do vinyl wrap again. This part here is the front bumper, and what I'm actually doing is adding score marks for another weak point in the design. I was hoping this would fail on a jump, but I actually had to plow into a hay bale to make it fail. You can see that I'm scoring it on both sides, and then I'm going to have to also cut through the vinyl wrap that's on the outside of itself so it doesn't hang on. Now if we go back to the race, you can see the instance where I hit that hay bale and it falls right off exactly where it's supposed to, so it did exactly what it was designed to do. My suspension system was just foam padding in the seat because the reality is I'm the only thing that needs to be suspended because I'm the most weight in the car. At this point we were ready to plan the skit, so we met up at a British pub and actually just got lost in the soccer game. You probably can't see it, but it's incredibly dark in that place. We had a great time, but we didn't accomplish much. Next, I actually used a contour gauge. Now a contour gauge helps you replicate complex angles or surfaces, and in this case I didn't have a consistent angle on this part, and I needed to make the side vents for the Lamborghini Countach. So I used the contour gauge, I transferred it to another piece of corrugated plastic, traced the lines, and sketched the rough shape that I needed to make sure that it would fit perfectly on the car. And after we finished up the side vent cutouts, I painted the tires, the chrome, so that they were true to the Countach, kind of. They weren't the right pattern, but they at least looked good. Now, after a few more stickers, some vinyl, and a little bit of touch-up, the car was, in my eyes, perfect. It did exactly what I needed to, and I was pretty happy with the design. Then finally we did a few skit dry runs to the music to see if we could get the timing down and make sure everything was going to make sense. Based on this really crude practice shot, we were great. We were ready for the prime time, and you see that reflected in the recap of the actual event itself. And that's it for this one. If you had any questions, please feel free to reach out. It was a great time, and I hope that you enjoyed.